She never raised her voice. She never demanded anything. She just gave. And yet, everyone left her confused, exhausted, guilty. But what if I told you empathy, when weaponized unconsciously, becomes a silent form of control? And the empath? Sometimes they're not the victim, but the mirror you can't escape. We've talked endlessly about narcissists, their masks, their manipulation, their obsession with control. But there's something we've missed. What if the empath, the one who gives everything, wasn't always innocent? This isn't about blame. It's about balance. Carl Jung didn't believe in clear villains or heroes. He believed in the shadow. And every empath, no matter how kind, carries one too. In the story we often hear, the narcissist plays the aggressor, the empath, the healer. But what happens when the healer needs to be needed more than they need to be loved? What happens when kindness becomes a cage? When giving becomes a way to take? When healing others becomes a way to avoid healing yourself? If you've ever felt guilty for questioning someone's endless giving, if you've ever wondered why the kindest people sometimes leave you feeling drained, this is for you. Because sometimes the most dangerous manipulation comes wrapped in love. Many empaths didn't choose that role. They earned it through survival. They learned it in homes where love felt conditional, where peace depended on their ability to manage everyone else's emotions. Picture this. You're 7 years old. Mom's crying again because dad came home late. Dad's door is slammed shut because mom asked too many questions. Your little sister is hiding under her bed because the yelling started again. And you learn to read the room like your life depends on it. Because it does. You become the translator between two people who speak different languages of pain. You learn to soothe mom's tears with hugs and promises that everything will be okay. You learn to approach dad carefully, offering him his favorite snack, making yourself small and helpful so he won't add to the chaos. If I fix it, I get to stay. If I soothe you, I become safe. If I disappear into your pain, maybe you'll finally see me. This was never love. It was survival. A child's desperate algorithm for belonging in a world that felt perpetually on the edge of collapse. You became the family therapist before you lost your first tooth. The mediator before you understood what conflict meant. The emotional sponge that absorbed everyone's pain so they wouldn't leave, so the family wouldn't shatter, so you would still have a place to call home. And it worked. They praised you for it. You're so mature for your age. You're such a good kid. You're wise beyond your years. We don't know what we'd do without you. But here's what they never said. You don't have to carry this. Your feelings matter too. Your love for who you are, not what you do. It's not your job to fix us. So you learn that love is earned through service. That worth is measured by how much pain you can absorb without breaking. That the only safe place in chaos is being the one who manages it, who anticipates it, who prevents it through perfect behavior and endless giving. You learned that your needs were secondary to everyone else's peace. That your pain was less important than their comfort. That your job in this world was to be useful, helpful, indispensable. Now, fast forward 20 years. You're an adult, and you find yourself drawn to chaos again. But this time, it wears a wounded face, speaks in therapy language, and promises you're different, special, the only one who really understands. Meet Jennifer, 28, marketing manager by day, relationship savior by night. She's always dating the broken ones, the artist with abandonment issues, the entrepreneur drowning in anxiety, the charming man-child who just needs someone to believe in him. Jennifer will tell you it's because she has a big heart. She'll say she just wants to help. She'll explain how she can see potential in people that others miss, how she understands their pain because she's felt it too. But dig deeper. What does helping actually give her? Power, purpose, a reason to exist, a role that feels essential. Jennifer doesn't just love these men. She needs them to need her. Because the moment they heal, the moment they stand on their own 2 feet, the moment they no longer require her emotional labor, where does that leave her? What looks like unconditional love might be a subconscious bargain. I'll fix your brokenness, absorb your pain, manage your emotions, so you never abandon me. It's not evil. It's not consciously manipulative, but it is about control, the softest, most insidious kind. The kind that makes you grateful while it slowly suffocates you. Watch how Jennifer operates. She remembers every detail of her partner's trauma. She anticipates their triggers before they do. She creates elaborate care plans, bringing them soup when they're overwhelmed, sending encouraging texts throughout the day, rearranging her schedule to accommodate their emotional needs. She becomes indispensable by making herself responsible for their well-being. And when they try to pull away, when they need space, when they want to handle something themselves, she's hurt. Not angry. Hurt. "I was just trying to help," she says with tears in her eyes. "I thought you needed me." And like Jung said, people will do anything, no matter how absurd, to avoid facing their own souls. Helping others becomes a way to not help themselves. Fixing others becomes a way to avoid their own brokenness. Managing others' emotions becomes a way to never sit with their own. Here's what's fascinating. Empaths don't just attract narcissists by accident. They seek them out. Unconsciously, yes, but purposefully. The narcissist's endless need for validation feeds the empath's need to be essential. It's not coincidence. It's chemistry. David, 32, always finds himself in relationships with people who have so much potential. He's dated the alcoholic who just needs understanding, the depressed artist who just needs support, the trauma survivor who just needs patience. He tells himself he's helping, but notice the pattern. He never dates people who are already whole. He never chooses partners who could survive without him. Because David's deepest terror isn't being hurt. It's being optional. Here's the irony. When an empath and narcissist collide, they're not opposites, they're mirrors. The meeting of two personalities is like the contact of two chemical substances. If there is any reaction, both are transformed. Carl Jung. But not all transformation is healing. Sometimes it's combustion. The narcissist is terrified of not being admired. The empath is terrified of not being needed. So they enter a contract, unspoken, unconscious. "I'll reflect your greatness if you make me feel irreplaceable." The narcissist gets their ego fed. The empath gets their purpose secured. Both get to avoid the terrifying work of facing themselves. But contracts based on shadows always collapse, because the narcissist eventually realizes they're dependent, and dependency threatens their image of strength. So they pull away, often cruelly, to prove they don't need anyone. And the empath? They chase, not because they love the narcissist, but because losing them means losing their identity. But here's the twist nobody talks about. Sometimes the empath doesn't let go either. Not because they can't, but because they won't. Because deep down, they know something the narcissist doesn't. The narcissist needs them more than they need the narcissist. And that's power. You don't need to raise your voice to manipulate. You don't need to make demands or issue ultimatums. You just have to make someone feel guilty for not accepting your help, for needing space, for having boundaries you don't respect. Let me tell you about Emma. 35, elementary school teacher, everyone's favorite person. She's the friend who always remembers your birthday, who brings soup when you're sick, who listens to every heartbreak for hours without complaint. She's perfect, too perfect. Emma has a collection of favorite phrases. "I'm fine. Don't worry about me. I just want you to be happy. It's no trouble at all. I love helping." But watch what happens when you try to reciprocate. When you offer to listen to her problems, she deflects with a smile. When you try to help her move apartments, she insists she can handle it. When you suggest she deserves better treatment from her boyfriend, she changes the subject immediately. Emma doesn't want your help. She wants your debt. Because every time she gives and you receive, the scales tip in her favor. You owe her something. Not money. Not favors. You owe her your presence, your attention, your guilt when you can't match her level of giving. Emma keeps careful track of emotional transactions, though she'd never admit it. She remembers every birthday card she sent, every meal she brought during your illness, every late-night phone call she answered. She remembers not to keep score, but to ensure you remember she doesn't keep score. And when you try to balance those scales, when you can't return her call immediately because you're dealing with your own crisis, when you need space to process something difficult, when you set a boundary around what you can give, she doesn't rage. She doesn't demand. She doesn't even complain. She just sighs, softly, almost imperceptibly. "I understand," she says, with that particular tone of wounded resignation. "I know I can be too much sometimes." But that sigh, that understanding, it's a masterclass in emotional manipulation. Because now you feel guilty, not for setting a boundary, not for having your own needs, but for making someone so giving, so selfless, so kind feel rejected. She's trained you, without saying a word, to associate your own self-care with her pain. Every time you choose yourself, you hurt the person who's given you everything. Every time you prioritize your needs, you're being selfish to someone who's never selfish. Let's talk about Lisa and Michael. They've been dating for 8 months. Lisa works in finance, high-stress job, long hours. She's been having a particularly rough time with a new boss who's micromanaging her every move. Michael, who works in tech, immediately launches into fix-it mode the moment Lisa mentions her work stress. He doesn't just listen. He researches her company's structure, drafts professional emails she didn't ask for, makes calls to his connections in finance, brings her breakfast in bed every morning before her early meetings, and creates elaborate self-care routines he insists will help her cope. When Lisa tries to talk about her feelings, Michael interrupts with solutions. When she wants to vent, he wants to strategize. When she needs emotional support, he offers practical advice. Lisa starts to feel suffocated. She loves Michael, but she feels like she's drowning in his care. So she asks for space to figure out her work situation herself. Michael is devastated. "I was just trying to help," he says, genuinely confused and hurt. "I love you. I can't stand seeing you in pain." But Michael's help wasn't about Lisa. It was about Michael proving his worth through action, demonstrating his value through problem solving, securing his place in the relationship through indispensability. He couldn't just be with Lisa in her struggle. He had to fix it, manage it, solve it. Because sitting with someone's pain without trying to change it felt useless to him. And feeling useless felt dangerous. Healing became a performance. Kindness became currency. Love became a transaction where his worth was measured by how much he could improve her life. And when Lisa pulled away, Michael didn't just feel heartbroken. He felt identityless. Because being the helpful one wasn't just what he did, it was who he was. Jung understood something that we've forgotten in our therapy speak culture. The brighter the persona, the darker the shadow. The person who's always strong is often desperately weak inside. The person who always gives is often fundamentally empty. The person who always heals others is often bleeding out in secret. But instead of facing that emptiness, that weakness, that inner bleeding, they fill it with other people's pain. They become addicted to others' brokenness because it distracts from their own. It's not evil. It's not consciously manipulative, but is a form of control. The softest, most dangerous kind. Because when someone makes themselves indispensable through suffering, questioning them feels like cruelty. Setting boundaries with them feels like abandonment. Leaving them feels like murder. Meet Angela, 41, social worker by profession, everyone's therapist by compulsion. Friends call her at midnight to process their relationship drama. Coworkers dump their burnout stories on her during lunch breaks. Her family treats her like an emotional dumping ground. Mother calls to complain about father. Father calls to complain about mother. Siblings call to complain about everyone. And Angela? She complains about it. Constantly. "I'm so tired of everyone's drama. Why do people always come to me with their problems? I need a vacation from being everyone's therapist. I can't handle one more emotional crisis." But notice, she never sets boundaries. She never says no. She never stops making herself available. She never changes her phone number, never tells people she's unavailable, never suggests they speak to an actual therapist. Because deep down, beneath all the complaining, Angela is terrified of what happens if she stops being useful. If people could handle their problems without her, would they still want her around? If she stopped being the go-to person for emotional emergencies, would anyone call just to chat? The chaos she complains about is the chaos she secretly requires. Because when the phone stops ringing, when the drama ends, when everyone is emotionally stable and functioning, Angela has to face herself. And that's the one person she spent her entire adult life avoiding. The empath's drug isn't alcohol, cocaine, or prescription pills. It's significance. It's matching. It's being essential to someone else's survival. Every crisis they solve gives them a hit of purpose. Every person they save validates their existence. Every thank you, every "I don't know what I'd do without you," every tearful gratitude feeds their starving sense of self-worth. But like any addiction, tolerance builds. You need bigger problems to feel the same high, more broken people to feel valuable, deeper chaos to feel essential. Until you're not healing people anymore. You're enabling them, keeping them dependent so you can stay necessary, preventing their growth so you can maintain your role. Consider Thomas, 29, who's been helping his best friend Jake with anxiety for 3 years. Thomas has become Jake's emotional crutch, talking him through panic attacks, accompanying him to social events he can't handle alone, making phone calls Jake is too anxious to make. On the surface, Thomas is being a good friend. But look closer. Every time Jake tries to push himself, to grow, to handle something independently, Thomas intervenes. "You don't have to do this alone," he says. "Let me help. Why struggle when I'm here?" Thomas has convinced himself he's helping Jake heal. But really, he's helping Jake stay sick. Because Jake's independence would mean Thomas's irrelevance. Empaths have mastered something narcissists never could. Guilt as a precision instrument. Narcissists use guilt like a sledgehammer. Obvious, crude, easy to identify and resist. But empaths use guilt like a scalpel. Precise, surgical, almost invisible until the damage is done. They never say, "You owe me." They say, "I just want you to be happy." They never say, "You're being selfish." They say, "I understand. You need to take care of yourself." They never say, "After everything I've done for you." They just look sad, disappointed, hurt, and somehow, that hurt becomes your responsibility. Their sadness becomes your guilt. Their disappointment becomes your shame. Because they position themselves as so selfless, so giving, so sacrificial, that any rejection of their help feels like a moral failing on your part. Jennifer's boyfriend tries to break up with her because he feels suffocated by her constant emotional management. Her response? "I'm sorry I loved you too much. I'm sorry I cared too much. I just wanted to help you heal." Now, he's not just ending a relationship. He's destroying someone whose only crime was loving him. He's not setting a boundary. He's being cruel to someone who sacrificed everything for him. The guilt is paralyzing. Because how do you argue with someone who frames their control as care? How do you resist someone who presents their manipulation as love? Jung described it without ever naming it outright. The healer's ego, the part of us that builds worth on others' wounds, that finds identity in others' brokenness, that requires dysfunction to feel functional. It's the shadow that whispers, "You're only valuable when someone needs saving. Your pain doesn't matter as much as theirs." Love is earned through sacrifice. If you're not helping, you're not worthy. The empath wants to be needed. But underneath that surface desire lies something deeper and more terrifying. They're afraid of being forgotten. They fear their own insignificance. They dread the possibility that without a crisis to manage, a person to fix, a wound to heal, they might discover there's nothing special about them at all. They chase others' chaos to avoid sitting with their own emptiness. They become fluent in others' trauma to avoid learning the language of their own pain. They develop expertise in healing others while remaining completely illiterate in healing themselves. And every time they successfully fix someone, help someone, save someone, they delay their own reckoning with the parts of themselves that feel broken, helpless, and in need of saving. But the shadow waits. It always waits. Let me tell you about Rachel. 37. Licensed therapist, burned out beyond recognition, but still taking on new clients because she can't say no to people in pain. Rachel spent years healing everyone else's trauma while her own festered in silence. She became an expert in attachment theory while struggling with her own attachment wounds. She guided others through depression while drowning in her own. She helped clients set boundaries while having none herself. One day, during a particularly intense session with a client dealing with codependency, the client said something that shattered Rachel's professional facade. "You know what's weird? You're the first therapist who seems more broken than I am. Like, I can see it in your eyes. You're drowning too." It wasn't cruel. It was honest. And it forced Rachel to see what she'd been hiding behind her professional mask, her degrees, her expertise. She wasn't healing people to help them. She was healing them to prove she wasn't beyond saving herself. Every client who got better was evidence that healing was possible. Every success story was hope that maybe, someday, she could fix herself too. But she was so busy being the healer that she never allowed herself to be the patient. Here's what happens when empathy becomes identity, when helping becomes compulsion, when giving becomes the only way you know how to love. You lose yourself in other people's stories. You become so fluent in their pain that you forget your own language. So skilled at reading their needs that you can't identify your own. So good at being what they need that you have no idea who you actually are underneath all that service. The empath's greatest tragedy isn't that they're taken advantage of by others. It's that they take advantage of themselves. They sacrifice their own healing on the altar of others' comfort. They betray their own needs to secure others' love. They abandon themselves to avoid abandonment. But here's the cruel irony. The very thing they do to avoid being left alone creates the loneliness they're trying to escape. Because when you never show up as yourself, when you're always performing helpfulness, always managing others' emotions, always being what they need rather than who you are, no one can actually love you. They love your function, your service, your utility. But you, the real you remain unseen, unknown, unloved. What empaths fear most isn't other people's pain. It's their own irrelevance. They're terrified of a world where no one needs them, where everyone is emotionally stable and functioning, where their particular brand of care isn't required. Because if they're not needed, who are they? This fear drives them to unconsciously seek out and create emotional dependency. They gravitate toward broken people not just because they want to help, but because broken people can't leave. They become indispensable through crisis management because crisis creates loyalty through necessity. Watch how an empath responds when someone they've been helping starts to heal independently. There should be joy, celebration, pride in their recovery. But often, there's something else: anxiety, loss, a desperate urge to find new problems to solve. Because healthy people don't need emotional managers. Healed people don't require constant care. Functional people can survive without empathic intervention. And for someone whose entire identity is built on being needed, other people's independence feels like a threat to their existence. True empathy doesn't erase you. It includes you. It doesn't mean over-functioning in others' lives. It means feeling their pain without making it your responsibility to fix. Real empathy says, I see your struggle and I care about it, but I'm not responsible for solving it. I can hold space for your pain without absorbing it into my body. I can love you without losing myself in your story. It's the difference between compassion and codependence, between supporting someone and enabling them, between loving someone and losing yourself in them. You don't disappear to be worthy of love. You learn to stay present with yourself, your needs, your boundaries, even when someone else is suffering. The hardest thing for an empath to accept isn't that they can't save everyone. It's that they don't need to be special, essential, or indispensable to be loved. You don't have to be the one with all the answers, the one who never breaks down, the one who carries everyone's emotional world on your shoulders. You can be ordinary, flawed, human, sometimes unavailable, sometimes struggling with your own problems, sometimes unable to help. You can have bad days and ask for support. You can set boundaries without feeling guilty. You can choose yourself without being cruel. The people who truly love you will stay, not because you're useful, but because you're you. Not because you solve their problems, but because your presence adds something valuable to their life that has nothing to do with what you could do for them. And the ones who leave when you stop overfunctioning, they were never really there for you anyway. They were there for your service, your emotional labor, your willingness to sacrifice yourself for their comfort. You are not a healer. You are a whole human, and your value is not in how much you give, but in how deeply you exist. The next time you feel the urge to fix someone, pause. Ask, do I love them? Or do I love the way they make me feel useful? Am I helping them? Or am I helping myself avoid my own pain? Am I giving from abundance or from emptiness? Empathy without awareness becomes sacrifice. Empathy with boundaries becomes medicine. Jung said, everything that irritates us about others can lead us to an understanding of ourselves. So maybe the narcissists you attract aren't your burden. Maybe they're your teachers, showing you where you've made yourself small, where you've traded your wholeness for belonging. Maybe the chaos you're drawn to isn't your calling. Maybe it's your compass, pointing you toward the chaos within yourself that still needs tending. The shadow isn't bad. It's just unseen. Your need to be needed isn't evil. It's human. It came from somewhere real, usually a childhood where love felt conditional, where worth felt earned, where being good meant being safe. That little person inside you who learned to survive through service, they don't need to be banished. They need to be held, seen, understood. You can thank them for keeping you alive and gently let them know we're safe now. We don't have to earn love anymore. When you finally face the shadow, the guilt, the loneliness, the desperate need to be essential, something beautiful happens. You stop needing to be special. You start learning to be real. You stop saving others from their humanity. You start embracing your own. You stop giving to get love. You start loving to give when it feels authentic, boundary, true. And like Jung said, the privilege of a lifetime is to become who you truly are. Not who you think you should be. Not who others need you to be. But who you actually are in all your imperfect, ordinary, extraordinary humanness. Here's what real healing looks like. It's messy. It's slow. It happens in silence, not in service. It's sitting with your own sadness instead of running to fix someone else's. It's asking for help instead of always being the helper. It's disappointing people sometimes because your own needs matter too. It's learning that love doesn't require you to disappear. That care doesn't mean carrying. That empathy includes you. The world doesn't need more martyrs. It doesn't need more people who give until they're empty. It needs more people who know their worth isn't tied to their utility. Who love from wholeness, not from wounds. Who heal themselves first, not out of selfishness, but out of wisdom. Because healed people heal people. Whole people make space for others' wholeness. And people who love themselves create a world where others can learn to love themselves too. You came here looking for answers about others. Maybe the real answer is about you. Not the you who gives and gives until there's nothing left, but the you who's been waiting underneath all that giving, all that doing, all that proving. The you who's worthy of love just for being alive. The you who doesn't need to save anyone to matter. The you who's been there all along, just waiting to be seen. If this resonated, let me know in the comments. And remember, the journey to yourself is the most important healing work you'll ever do.